Good morning and welcome to Table to Stage. I'm Jordan Worma and this is my podcast. My continuing quest to explore the landscape of creativity in my neck of the woods, Connecticut. Today on the pod, we have Fulbright scholar and world traveler Jacquelyn Gleisner. She's currently on staff at the University of New Haven, and she has had her work showcased in exotic places like New Hampshire, Kentucky, and Botswana. So stay tuned for that story. Jacquelyn likes to work with large form scrolls, which I'll let her describe. But the impact of her travel on the work that she does is very apparent. And it was great to be able to speak with her, get her points of view on so many different topics. So I hope you enjoy hearing from her as well. If you're new to the show, I hope you'll go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes. And ratings and reviews on iTunes are really fantastic. Also, you can follow the pod on Facebook, Instagram, or on Twitter to keep up with everything going on. And if you want even more content, you can visit patreon.com/tabletostage to learn about that. But for now, I have a cup of coffee getting cold, so here's Jacquelyn Gleisner from her studio in New Haven.
I was born in Buffalo, New York.
Oh, okay.
And we lived there until I was about 5, and then we moved to the suburbs of Atlanta into a very small town called Kennesaw, Georgia.
Oh, wow.
There's actually, I think it's still on the books, but there's like some old law that like every household has to have a gun.
Wow.
Fun fact about Kennesaw, Georgia.
All right. That's an interesting law to have there.
Yeah.
And how did you end up in Connecticut?
There were many, many stops in between
Yeah.
Georgia and Connecticut, but I went to college in Boston and then graduate school, a bunch of other random places since then. And then eventually, the thing that drew me back here was my sister lives here with her 4 kids. And I actually lived here, oddly, the year after I graduated from college. And I like its proximity to New York City, but having lived in New York City for a few years, I discovered kind of quickly it wasn't really a great spot for me.
Okay.
I'm too introverted.
Yeah. That's a problem. I can't spend more than a few hours in the city, and it's too much for me.
Yeah.
Too much stimulation.
I love New York, but I just can't live there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you studied initially at Boston University?
Correct.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're going to college for art, right? What was it that initially got you into art, and how did you develop in such a way that you ended up going to study it in college?
I always loved art. I feel like I get asked this question a lot, and I just, for whatever reason, I just knew that I always wanted to be an artist. From the time that I was very little, I knew that this was the path ultimately that I would take. There have been numerous moments of doubt along that path.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common.
But I always gravitated towards art. I was the kind of kid that you could leave me alone with a bunch of markers and a piece of paper, and I would entertain myself for hours. And one of my grandmothers was a painter, so I do remember, thinking that it didn't feel like something that was totally outside of the realm of possibility. Like, I was definitely aware that it was a thing that people did.
Yeah.
And because of her influence, we lived, when I was very young, within walking distance to the Albright Knox Art Gallery, which is Buffalo's main contemporary art.
Buffalo's known for its big art scene, right? So I'm sure they have.
They actually have a really phenomenal
I know they have a football
collection.
team there.
Go Bills. Yeah. But I don't know.
I mean, Buffalo, New York, and Kennesaw, Georgia are not the two places I think of when I think of
Definitely
fine
not.
art
Yeah.
and whatnot. So was it a family influence, like your grandmother painting? Was it that what drew you into art as a medium for yourself?
I feel like it was just inside of me. Like I always
okay.
had this inclination towards the arts, and my parents definitely, they didn't discourage it. I don't know if they really wanted me to become a professional artist, but
Too much financial security, probably.
Right. Yeah. Right. They were worried about how
Yeah.
much money I would make and how rich I would be as a fine artist. Yeah, no, but like I think that they've realized over time that like there's nothing else really I should be doing on this planet except for this.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So going to college in Boston, what was that experience like? Because I mean, Boston's a pretty far cry from upstate New York or anywhere in Georgia.
Yeah.
So what was that experience like for you studying art in a city that's really it's I mean, they've got so much there. There's art, there's the sciences, there's all kinds of stuff. It's such a great city. So what was that like for you being just immersed in all of this?
It was phenomenal. And I remember when I was in high school, I felt ready to live in a big city and to experience more than what Georgia had to offer me. Like, Atlanta's come a long way since I was in high school, and I think there's definitely a lot of cool stuff happening now. But
I was born in Georgia, so
I didn't know that.
feel
That's so
free.
cool. Go Dogs.
Yeah, boy. Yeah.
But so I remember just being so excited that I could go for a walk, and I could walk for hours in Boston and see Chinatown, and I could also go to the symphony. They had like $5 advance tickets. So, and of course the museums are amazing, like the Museum of Fine Arts, and the ICA wasn't around then, but it is now, and it's great. But we went on field trips, I know, to like the Fogg Museum, which is Harvard's collection. Just for the first time, I felt like I was really in a place where a lot of people around me appreciated the art. So it felt good. It felt like a good spot for me to be.
Yeah. So during your time studying, you got to do quite a bit of traveling. And that has to have had a lasting impact on not just you as a person, but as an artist and as an educator now. So while you were studying in Boston, you got a chance to go to Italy, right?
Yes.
So what was that like?
That was really fun. I was a junior, and I spent it was my spring semester in Venice. And Venice is kind of like Disneyland, like it's definitely sort of built on its tourist economy.
Yeah.
But we also went to Milan and Florence and Padua and Rome.
Wow.
And I spent a week in Paris over my spring break. And so I just remember, I was actually just talking about this recently with a friend of mine, that when I went to Italy, I didn't have actually this deep appreciation for Renaissance art. I was really I loved Joan Mitchell, and I loved the abstract expressionists, because those were a lot of the influences that my professors at BU really loved.
Okay.
And so by association, I loved them too. But then, in Venice, you could just be walking down the street and you would pop into a little church, and there would be this 40-foot tall Titian painting, and it would be
Titian? What is Titian?
Titian is an artist.
Oh, okay. All right.
Just the name of an artist.
Gotcha.
And so it that was really incredible. Just the amount of art that I saw, and the appreciation that I gained for Renaissance work in particular at that time.
I mean, that's got to be a different experience from just some random person going on vacation to Italy, as opposed to somebody who's actually studying art going to a place like that has such a deep and rich history of not just fine art, but I mean, you have all the names everybody knows as far as classical art comes from that part of the world. So as someone studying the arts and preparing to be an artist as a profession, how did that impact you, being able to have that experience at the time?
I definitely remember being aware of like this sense of time and how young America seemed when I returned, how we don't really have structures that are from like the Middle Ages in our city centers, or big walls protecting, our cities from invaders or anything like that. And that was like a really, I feel like you don't think about those things unless you experience them in this firsthand, day-to-day sort of way. And I think that it makes me look at our culture in a much different light. Like we're
babies.
Yeah, we are babies. We don't have hundreds of years of history or art history, really. Well, we do have hundreds of years, but we don't have.
Yeah, right.
In the same sense,
people can go eat at a restaurant, in Italy or France, that their great grandparents may have visited at some point.
Yeah.
And the oldest buildings we have here are 200, 250 years old. Yeah, it's very different. It's very different.
And I feel like another thing that I took away from seeing these masterpieces regularly while I was living in Italy was this like deep appreciation for craft and craftsmanship.
Oh, okay.
Because things were just made much more slowly and much more impeccably.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can see that.
So, yeah.
Okay. So you've spent the time in Italy, and you said you visited France, but then you also got to visit Finland on a Fulbright grant?
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Talk about that. Because, I think everybody's heard Fulbright before.
Yeah.
But what's that process like? How did that come about for you?
The process is daunting for sure. I was a graduate student. I was in my second year of graduate school when I applied for the Fulbright grant. And I had been working at the library at the Cranbrook Academy of Art, and somebody just randomly turned in this book about Marimekko, which is a Finnish fashion and textile company.
Okay.
And because it was my job to check in the books, but it was very slow most nights. Usually I would just sit at the desk and read the books, or at least like flip through the pages before going back and shelving them.
Yeah.
And I just immediately felt this really strange connection with this textile company. And then later I realized that the sheets that I had when I was a baby were actually from Marimekko.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so then I started looking into Finland and how incredible of a country it is, and how strong a tradition there is, like with their design and architecture, and I think like their female presence in politics, and also in Marimekko in particular was started by a woman. She was helped a little bit by her husband, but this was like during the 1950s when women weren't really starting their own, businesses and running them successfully. And now they're still around, and they're like collaborating with Target.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So they've changed a lot. Like ideologically, I think that they've definitely moved in a different direction. But in the beginning, they had this whole like communal spirit, and at one point they actually built like housing units for people to live in, and you could have Marimekko furniture and clothing and live in like a Marimekko house. It was like a whole way of living. Which sounds a little creepy in one respect, but I think the intention was good.
There's a lot of companies in the United States that did a lot of that too. For a lot of immigrants that were coming over during the industrial period. But what was Finland like? Were you able to immerse yourself in the culture there at all, and experience some of the art there?
Yeah, yes and no. I think that Finnish is a very challenging language to learn. It is related distantly to Hungarian, and it is agglutinative. So
Yeah.
there's like the root word, and then it gets conjugated. Like there's the dog, but if the dog is in the house or outside of the house, like there are different endings for it. So when I was learning Finnish, I would understand like, oh, they're talking about dogs.
It's one of the few remaining Ural languages.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I was studying Finnish when I was there, but definitely knowing the Finnish language is really like the gateway to the culture there. And so because I was an English speaker and everybody speaks English,
Sure.
You definitely immerse yourself in a much different way if you're not speaking the language. But what was really special about my time there was I started writing for a blog. They've since changed their name to an online magazine because it sounds classier. But so I started writing for Art21 and their blog. And Art21 is a subsidiary of PBS. And they have like this great series of video interviews with contemporary artists. And so I was interviewing Finnish artists, and that position as this blogger actually allowed me like entree into the Finnish art scene. So I interviewed lots of famous Finnish artists.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Like this one guy, I remember I interviewed him. His name's Jani Lenninen because he had been arrested because he kidnapped a Ronald McDonald statue from from a McDonald's restaurant and like held it for ransom. And it was creating quite a buzz in Finland because it's a very small country. It has like only 5 million people.
Yeah.
So their art scene is definitely it's very teeny tiny.
Yeah.
Like everybody knows everybody.
How does the artwork, especially like traditional stuff from that region, compare to what you had experienced in Italy previously?
So I think Finland is definitely much stronger with their design. Like their architecture is phenomenal, like Alvar Aalto and Saarinen the Elder, Eliel Saarinen, not his son, who designed the Arc here in St. Louis.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, and actually Eliel Saarinen also designed pretty much, many of the buildings on the campus where I was going to graduate school as well, Cranbrook Academy of Art. So I was like kind of like infused with this Finnish aesthetic before I even knew really what it was. So I think that like there are people making paintings and sculptures and things like that. But I think historically there's always been much more of an interest in like ceramics or textile design and stuff like that.
Okay.
Much more utilitarian. There's like a utilitarian streak that runs through the culture, I think.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that makes sense up in that part of the world.
Oh yeah, it's cold.
Yeah.
And it's dark.
So, I mean, all right, so we've hit Boston, Italy.
Yeah.
Finland.
Yeah.
I know you studied in Michigan.
Yeah.
I'm more curious about Botswana than I am about Michigan.
Yeah.
So how did you end up in Botswana, and what was that experience for you?
It was totally random, to be honest.
Would you just throw a dart at a map?
No, like one day out of the blue, I got an email from a curator at the Art and Embassies program, which is run through our State Department. And so they curate temporary or permanent art exhibitions inside of the residences where ambassadors live, or sometimes at the embassies themselves.
Okay.
So I got this email, and she said, like the ambassador to Botswana, Earl Miller, really likes your work,
Oh, wow.
and we're interested in having you create something for his it ended up being his dining room because they wanted one of my scroll paintings, but they were like, we don't have 30 feet of wall space. So could you make one that's 15 feet long?
Yeah.
And I did. And then I thought that was that. But then a few weeks later, they emailed me again and they were like, oh, actually, we're interested in having you come to Botswana and maybe teach a few workshops and meet some of the younger artists in this country. And from there, things progressed.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how did the ambassador to Botswana come across your work? What was the piece that opened this door for you?
So Earl Miller is a very cool dude.
Well, he's an ambassador.
Yeah, not anymore. His tenure is over.
Okay,
and I'm actually not sure if he took a different position or was going to possibly retire. But then I think when he found out, well, anyways, he was from Michigan.
Okay.
So I think that's what the connection was originally. He was looking for artists who had some sort of tie to Michigan. I think he grew up like outside of Flint.
Okay.
And he really loved the idea for my scroll work that they were made on paper and like anybody can buy paper, and so like anybody could be making really like wild and interesting artworks without spending like a ton of money on supplies or
Sure, yeah.
He thought of them as like being really democratic and accessible, and so that was like really what attracted him to my work.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So you have something in the embassy there now?
The thing I had in the embassy, so I had something at his residence for about 3 years. And then when his position ended and the new ambassador came in, I'm sure they've either, well, I don't know actually if the funding has been cut for the Art in Embassies program with the new administration in this country.
Yeah.
I would have guessed that it's been impacted in some way. But
It's got art in the title. I'm sure it's impacted somehow.
Right. Sadly. But so I think after I had gone to Botswana, they also commissioned me to make something to give as a gift to the president of Botswana,
wow.
which I think is on view at the embassy there.
Okay.
So I still have a little piece of me in Botswana.
That's awesome.
Yeah, really cool.
So what was there anything specific that like, because if you're being asked to make a piece specifically for this building in this country, what was the inspiration behind what you did, and what did you actually end up delivering?
So I ended up taking a bunch of, I worked with pictures that I had taken of baskets that I saw while I was in Botswana, and used some of those designs to create like a larger abstract work on paper based on those patterns.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, that leads in pretty nicely to talking about your specific art style. I mean, you've mentioned scrolls a couple times now.
Yeah.
And you've mentioned 30 feet.
Yeah.
So these are large pieces of art that you're creating. It's 30 feet long. How wide are we talking here?
About 3.5 feet wide.
Wow. Okay. So this is, and it's just paper. So will you just get a roll of paper?
Yeah.
Unspool it and.
Yeah.
All right.
I get a roll of paper, which is 10 yards.
Yeah.
And then I paint in sections. Usually the sections are as big as my table is, that I have before in this space where we are right now, my studio at Erector Square. When there's not as much stuff in the space and I like move things out of the way, I can unroll a much longer, I think I can do almost 20 feet, and then paint 20 feet at a time that way. So kind of as much space as I have to work on it. But usually I will paint about 8 feet, roll it up, unroll more, paint that, and then keep going until the whole thing is done. And then many times the first time I would see the completed painting would be when I would be taking it outside to document it in these different environments, like shopping mall plaza or on a tennis court.
So the first time you get to see it is when you're exposing it to the public.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is it that you're putting down on this paper? It's not, I mean, you're not doing landscapes or murals or anything, right? So what is it? What's your style? What is the artwork that you're actually producing on this format?
So they are usually geometric patterns that I create based off of patterns that I find in textiles, or sometimes it's like, like an instructional book about how to create macrame, and I'll be like really attracted to the way that the threads are woven together, and I will work out the design on paper beforehand, and then when I'm painting on my larger piece of paper, I will go kind of section by section, but I will have like an understanding of how the pattern repeats beforehand.
Sure. Okay.
And they're usually wildly colorful.
I was just going to ask, is this like muted colors or crazy, vibrant, bright colors, or
usually pretty crazy, vibrant colors? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what do you do with? I mean, a 30-foot canvas. I mean, doesn't fit a lot of places.
No.
So where are you displaying all of this work that you do?
They've been displayed in lots of different places.
Besides Botswana.
Yeah, besides Botswana. So there was one here in New Haven that was displayed on the outside of a building, the Institute Library, which is right on Chapel Street in downtown New Haven. And it was in connection with their Nasty Woman show, actually.
Okay.
So there were this series of Nasty Women shows that kind of like went viral throughout the country after Trump called Hillary Clinton a nasty woman.
Okay.
Somebody, I think the first one was like in Queens, decided to curate a show that was titled like Nasty Women or Nasty Woman. I don't remember which one it is right now, but
it caught on down here though, huh?
Yeah, and lots of places. There were lots of places that were having their own version of that show where it was like the show here was sort of like anything goes. Anybody could participate in it.
Yeah.
But in this case, one of the curators of that show reached out to me. She's a curator at ArtSpace.
Okay.
Her name's Sarah Fritchie, and she said, I've been looking at your scrolls, and like I think it would be really great to show one. And we were both kind of like, but where? And then she was like, what if we do it outside?
Now, was this just a regular roll of paper that you hung up?
Yeah, just a regular roll of paper. So my partner Ryan and I backed it with Tyvek so it wouldn't disintegrate immediately, and then we put grommets up and down both sides of it and threaded like a piece of rope, and then kind of like made the rope tight. So it was actually like the ropes were coming out of windows, but it was hanging flush against the side of the building, or as flush as it could be. It was flapping around a little bit because we did have some like pretty nasty. It was March, so we had some winter
nasty
weather
for the nasty women.
Exactly.
What was this another pattern that you had up for this, or was this a more direct image?
So this one was a different pattern.
Okay.
It was actually the first scroll that I ever made. I put outside for this show, and it kind of looks like a psychedelic friendship bracelet. If you look at it,
I saw the picture on your website.
Yeah, it's really colorful. There are like a series of 3 rectangular forms, and then I don't know what the name of it is, but like when you were in grade school, did you ever do the thing where you like make the chain of S's? Like you do the 3 dashes and then you do the diagonal lines to connect them, and then.
I'm going to say no.
Okay.
I mean, it's been so long, I have no idea.
It's based on that pattern that like I think a lot of people know how to make.
Okay.
I don't know if it has like a special name or not, but it like comes directly out of my like childhood and being in math or whatever and doodling on a piece of paper.
Yeah. All right. How long was that displayed for?
It was up for about a month, and then we got a really wicked windstorm that just ripped actually the grommets out of one side of it. So then I think we took it down after that one. But it was up during rain and snow, and some of the colors bled and the paper definitely buckled, and so it was a totally different experience to kind of like watch it wither and disintegrate on the side of this building.
So what is it about the size? I mean, these are huge things that you're creating here. Why do you choose to work, in such large formats where it isn't easy to display on a wall somewhere? What draws you to the larger format pieces?
Well, I think it's kind of provocative to be making something that's so large scale, but also with a material that's not really known for its permanence, because they're all paper, right? So if I make this giant paper thing and then I put it on the ground or put it outside in some way, I think people people start to question they definitely question me, you know, but I think they definitely have questions about like the nature of permanence and like what that gesture might mean for them as well. Like you spend so much time working on this thing, you know, but we all know that it's not going to last forever. Like this thing is definitely going to fall apart at some point. And there have been times when I've brought them outside and just like a big gust of wind has like almost like ripped them in two. They've like taken off in some ways. But
what do you do?
I chase them, you know, and then I usually pack up and try to find a day that's like not quite as windy to like put them outside. But they definitely, like, they get dirty, they get scuffed. One squirrel, I unfurled it inside of this forest floor. And there were actually like these two squirrels that were like fighting nearby, and one squirrel just ran right over the piece of paper, and another squirrel got like halfway through it and then like stopped and then turned around and then ran back the other way.
Oh no!
Like he was
you
scared.
Got little footprints all over it now.
Yeah.
Are you trying to create those questions for people, but when you're making your work, like asking about the permanence and the purpose of spending the time on something like that?
Yeah, I think so. And another thing I'm kind of interested in is like, where do paintings live and how do we experience art? You know, like it's not your everyday occurrence to be walking in a parking garage and find like a 30-foot painting that has just been like rolled out. And I like the idea that I would be bringing something different to like a more mundane space as well. And that these paintings have kind of like lives of their own. They can walk or roll or go to weird places.
Yeah, I mean, do you keep them when you know after you've done these things, you've put them where you're going to put them for a while? Do you hold on to them, or they get recycled, or what?
A little bit of both. Many of the scrolls have been recycled into installations. So I'll take the paper, cut it up, and then reform them into different shapes and then install them on the wall or on the floor. They've been in different environments to take the two-dimensional paper and then turn it into something that's like sculptural and more immersive.
Okay, so you don't just always work on flat papers. You work in other mediums as well?
Yeah, I also make installations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you about a couple of them, because I saw on your website, which has a lot of really cool stuff on it.
Thank you.
The ziggurat.
Yeah.
Which I guess you did with your fiance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ryan Paxton.
Ryan Paxton, another artist.
Yes.
Right? Okay. And that installation was in, I don't even know how to pronounce this, a small town in Kentucky?
Paducah, Kentucky. Yeah.
Paducah. Okay. So what was that? I mean, I could try to explain it because I have seen a picture of it.
Yeah.
But I'd rather hear from you. What was that? Because it's not a scroll.
It is not a scroll.
It is a structure.
It is a structure. And the structure itself is based off of the form of a ziggurat.
Yeah.
And so in ancient times, basically ziggurats were places where sometimes the select people would go into the ziggurat or like the top levels of the ziggurat to escape a flood, or also they had like a religious purpose. But Paducah itself is kind of like it's a wacky little place. It's really close to the Illinois border, and it has this amazing quilt museum there, and there's like a strong tradition of quilters in the area. So the ziggurat itself, like the structure is made out of wood, and then inside the wood on half of it there are pieces of woven paper, kind of mimicking.
I'm looking at the picture of it right now, trying to follow.
Yeah. And then there are like a series, like a network of strings also that connect like one side to the other.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like this space that you can't completely enter. It was suspended from the ceiling, and there were maybe like 3 feet. And during the opening, when we invited like everybody that we met in Paducah for the 2 weeks that we were there to come by and see it, people were like laying on the cement floor to try to look up into the like center part of it, which was really fun and cool.
Well, I'm looking at these pictures, and every angle of the structure makes it look like something completely different.
Yeah, it's hard
like
to take
from
good
one
photos.
angle. From one angle, and I'm gonna age myself with this, but it looks like a map from a Qbert video game from one angle, and then and from another it looks like a tie-dye T-shirt, and then another one it looks I don't know. It's fascinating to look at. Like every angle is something entirely different. That's really, really cool. How did you end up in Kentucky doing this?
We applied for a residency.
Okay.
I think we'd been dating for maybe a few months at that point.
Yeah.
And when we first started dating, we were making pottery together, actually. Ryan...
You know, everybody's thinking about the movie Ghost now, right?
Yeah. It was just like that. No, usually he would like throw a bowl, and then I would paint part of it, and he would paint another part of it, and so that we would have these like...
Throwing is the process of making one on the wheel, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Not chucking one across the room.
Not destroying
and then
it.
painting
No.
the chips.
Okay. No. So I think like from the very beginning, we've had like a strong history of making things together, and we thought it would be fun to try to make something more ambitious together.
Yeah.
And it was, but it was also, it was hard. It
Yeah.
was definitely hard.
Now, have you worked together on other projects?
We've worked together on a lot of projects. I think basically anytime I have a show, Ryan is involved in some way. He's like my go-to for hanging and installing the show. And if I have a question, like, sometimes I'll come up with these like really harebrained ideas, like I want to suspend it from the ceiling, but I want it to be like really, really heavy.
Okay.
He's the guy who like helps me figure out how to do the things that I want to do.
Yeah, I mean, well, we're in the studio right now, and when I came in, you told me about this contraption here.
That is correct.
Which looks like something like the villain in an Iron Man movie might throw the good guy into to try to get rid of him. But it's a 3D scanner,
yeah,
right? Okay.
Yeah.
So I can imagine you two are, when you're collaborating, you're doing very different parts of the project. How has that worked out? Generally pretty well, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think we complement each other really well.
Yeah.
I tend to be like more intuitive and sometimes a little bit quick on my feet when I'm trying to like think through, something that's going on like in the studio or whatever. But Ryan is definitely like much more methodical, and we both have like very different skills.
Okay.
So that's great. That's really, like beneficial for both of us.
Now, as far as like installations you've done on your own, one of the other pieces that I saw was something you called folds of the cloak.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit? Because that is also a very different look to the other installations.
Yeah. So again, I was working with these paper forms and creating like more of a 3D space, but all of the paper in this particular installation, I was working as a high school and middle school teacher, and I was teaching adjunct, like a few college classes. And every day in my middle school and high school classes, the students would just kind of like, if I handed back a project to them, they would just like toss it in the trash.
Nice.
And they weren't artists, not yet anyways. But it used to really like break my heart. And so I had this stash in my classroom of all of their old art projects that I kept.
Yeah.
And so I shredded those into small pieces of paper and then used those things to help form the surfaces of these pyramids in this particular installation.
Wow. That's interesting. Did you tell your students about recycling this stuff that way?
I don't think I did.
I'm just curious because I think for me that would have been kind of a neat thing, like to know that something that I had thought was garbage,
Yeah, I don't
had been used in a more permanent installation.
I think that I was working a little bit inside of my classroom because I was part-time at that particular school. And so I had sometimes like hours in between like two classes. And so I would use that classroom to work on things. And so I know that there were definitely remnants and pieces of that work in my classroom. And I know like a few students definitely asked like what I was up to.
Yeah. So you are currently teaching, right, at University of New Haven?
Yep.
So what is that like for you to be able to take, I mean, you've been all over the world working as an artist, learning in all these different environments, and now you're taking that experience and passing it on to another generation of hopeful artists, I would guess. How is that for you, being able to impact them that way? And are they, in turn, having an impact on your work?
Yeah, I think your students always have an impact on your work, and generally just kind of like the person that you are. I think that teaching has made me more compassionate, because, like you learn a lot about your students and their lives and like where they come from, and you definitely often like develop personal relationships with them. Like you just know, like I've got two brothers or whatever. Right. Especially in an art classroom, I feel like there's a lot more room to talk about stuff because the studio classes are all 3 hours long. So you'll be like sitting in a room with people for 3 hours. Yeah. And traveling, I think, is just so important for people to help them from being ignorant. Is the main thing, like for you to really understand that there are so many different ways that you can live in this world and different places and different paths that people can take. And so I think that, like that's one thing I just try to keep in the back of my mind, because Botswana was definitely, like the people in Botswana were so different from the people in Venice and in Finland too. Sure. So, I think it's really good to have like that kind of awareness that we all have differences and one is not better or worse than the other. It's just, we're from different
being
places.
Able to do that and travel and meet people from different parts of the world. I mean, it's so important, like, if you have the opportunity to be able to do that, because learning about other people helps with empathy and compassion and all that stuff. And just staying insulated,
totally,
really hurts that. That's great that you've been able to have that experience. It's really incredible. The Botswana thing blows my mind. I think. You don't really think about. I mean, everybody knows there's embassies all over the world, but I at least for me, I would never think for 2 seconds about the living conditions of the ambassadors at the embassies, and they have to worry about furnishing these places and putting art and carrying a little bit of their culture into this other part of the world to make not just make themselves more comfortable, feel more at home, but bring some of that into that community. Because I mean, traveling and experiencing other cultures works in all directions. So that's really cool.
Both the Fulbright program and the Art in Embassies program were they were started with this idea in mind that art could really be a way to educate people about different cultures. Yeah. And that's like meaningful and really powerful. And I feel really lucky and so grateful that I've benefited from these experiences. Like the State Department's been really good to me.
It's interesting that you said it, because like some of the ways that we're able to learn the most about the history of just human beings all over the world is through the art that they have left behind. Yeah. So it's very upsetting to me that so many arts programs are always losing funding and people are being kind of pushed away from that kind of stuff. Totally. Because it is such a lasting and important piece of history. Yeah. So what would you say had been your main inspirations on your path as an artist, as far as choosing your medium and choosing your colors and your styles, are there specific artists that have influenced you, or is it just kind of a combination of your experiences?
Yeah. I think, as an artist, you look at tons of art all of the time. And after a while, you get like sort of this like feeling of like inundation, maybe. But I do know when I was in graduate school, that was like the first time that I really discovered and learned a lot more about the pattern and decoration movement in this country from the 1970s. And Miriam Shapiro and Judy Chicago were both involved, and they've both made like really pretty incredible things. So Miriam Shapiro would take like things that other women had embroidered or sewn and sort of like collage them into her own work. And Judy Chicago, of course, made the dinner party, which is on permanent view at the Brooklyn Museum. It's that huge triangular table that has all these place settings for like famous women throughout history.
I think I've seen that before.
Yeah. I mean, it's really impressive. And like a ton of people helped her make it too over the 5 years that it was like in process. But so the pattern and decoration movement in particular really was interested in championing this idea of underrepresented cultures, and they really wanted to mix high and low art forms, and that's sort of the undercurrent for most of my work, this interest in patterns and textiles, because I think, very often museums will have like a really great collection of textiles, but they'll be like buried in the basement somewhere and like people don't see them. And like the people who were making those textiles were usually women too. So like that was like the chosen, or like that was the avenue that women really had to create art for many, many hundreds of years. And so I think it really, it seems to just always come back to the pattern and decoration movement for me.
And what do you see for yourself as far as your next major projects, or your next scroll, your next installation? Do you have anything planned?
Yeah. So I've been working lately with the double helix form and kind of like thinking about that as another source for patterning, because DNA is based on like these, you have like 4 nucleotides, and that repeat. Yes, exactly. That repeat in a certain way. And so like I'm thinking about kind of like the inherent connection of like patterning within our bodies at the moment, and like looking for different ways that can evolve too.
Well, if you get 30 feet of double helix, you've got almost none of the human genome.
Totally true. Totally true.
Well, that's really fascinating though. It's an interesting pattern to try to tackle. That should be fun to follow on that one. All right, so I would like to get to the kind of silly part of this whole shenanigans now. So I have a segment called Front Row Center. I'm just going to give you 5 rapid fire questions. They're rapid fire for me.
Okay.
You can take your time answering them if you want to. They're supposed to be fun. First, the answer that comes to your mind. The best meal you've ever had.
The best meal I have ever had. Well, my fiance and I used to go, when he used to live in Crown Heights, we used to go to this restaurant called Mayfield. And I remember one time in particular, they had a risotto with scallops, and it was phenomenal. We ate there like almost on a weekly basis, but this one meal in particular was really good. I love risotto. I love scallops. So for me, it was like the perfect combo.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Your favorite movie?
Oh, geez. I don't watch a lot of movies anymore, actually. But I used to really love, well, this is a stupid answer. But the first movie that just came to my mind was The Last Unicorn, which I used to
Oh
watch
my God.
all of the time when I was a little kid. And it's totally trippy. I think Mia Farrow does the voice of the unicorn.
Oh my God.
It's a great story.
Wow. If you'd asked me to write down the title of 1,000 movies, I would not have come up with that one. But I do remember
But you've seen
now.
it, yeah.
I don't know if I've seen it, but I am aware of it.
I watched it again recently, and I was like super unimpressed with the animation. Like once you've seen like contemporary animations and like, I don't know.
Yeah, all of my favorite stuff from when I was a kid doesn't really hold up all that well.
No,
there are a few that really do, but most of them not so much. One place that you think everyone should visit before it's too late.
Before it's too late, meaning like
however you want to take it.
Okay. Well, I think everybody should go to Finland.
Okay.
And go especially up to the northern parts of Finland.
All right.
Like experiencing the lack of daylight during the wintertime, or like the extreme, like 20 hours of daylight in the summer was like a really crazy and cool thing.
Yeah.
And I just remember living there and looking out over the horizon and just feeling like I'm at the top. I'm at the top of this planet right now.
Yeah.
And like somehow feeling like I could sense that, even though I know that's probably not true in any way, but the shadows seem different and the clouds seem different to me.
Yeah.
And of course it's really cold.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. One time in your life where you have just laughed uncontrollably.
One time in my life when I've laughed uncontrollably.
Everybody needs a good belly laugh once in a while.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I feel like I laugh a lot. What is a good time that I laughed really uncontrollably? This is going to take me a while to think of like something specific.
Doesn't have to be something super specific.
Well, okay. Then I feel like I laugh a lot. My sister lives here in New Haven, and she's got 4 kids.
Okay.
And I think that one of the reasons why I was so happy to move here and spend time with them is because, like, it's just awesome spending a lot of time with little kids. Like, they're silly, and they bring much more of a sense of lightness to your life than you would encounter otherwise. So last weekend they all came over and spent like an hour jumping into this huge pile of leaves that we had raked in the front yard, and there was just like so much joy and so much excitement and like happiness. So kids are great.
Yeah, that's good. Carrot cake, is it a vegetable or a dessert?
Dessert all the way.
Nah.
No? Vegetable? It's delicious.
Got carrot in it.
Yeah.
It's a vegetable. I will stand by that one. All right. And the last thing I like to ask everybody is for a recommendation. So if you could try to sell me on something that you've experienced recently, could be anything that you would just would really like other people to try that you think they would enjoy.
Okay. Well, I am going to recommend another podcast.
Oh, no.
I'm
Not
sorry.
the competition. There's room for everybody.
But yeah, this is a really good one. Like, I was making up things to do so that I could keep listening to this particular podcast. Like, I remember I went to the gym one night, and it was like an exercise class where we were like listening to the radio or music during it. And then I went and worked out after that, just so I could like spend some time listening to this podcast.
All right.
But so the name of the podcast is Seen on Radio, and the series itself that I really loved is called Seeing White, and it's all about racism and race relations in the United States. And it's just really thoughtful and well researched, and it's great. Check it out.
Seen on Radio.
Yes, and Seen is SCENE.
Yeah.
Yep.
It comes up if you spell it wrong too.
Oh, does it? Oh, cool.
Yeah, you get the domain and all that stuff all set for people that can't spell.
Yeah.
Great. How are you feeling now?
Feeling good.
Yeah.
How are you feeling?
Good.
Good.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Right. So there you go. Make sure to follow Jacquelyn on Instagram at Jacquelyn Gleisner and visit her website for a peek at her work. It's definitely worth checking out. Thanks again to Jacquelyn for coming on the show. Thanks for listening. I'm not going to make a specific recommendation this week, as I know you are all very busy with the holiday season. My brain is rather squishy these days, just trying to keep up with all the things that I tend to overextend myself with. But I hope you are all able to enjoy the season regardless of the specific holiday or lack thereof that you may be celebrating. If the season gets you down, please reach out to someone close to you or take advantage of the help hotlines that are available. And if you need to, email tabletostage@gmail.com if you don't have anyone else to talk to. Don't go it alone. That's it for now. Until next time, keep creating.